Dear all, hello. We welcome you to another meeting of Crimean Studies Association. Today we have our guest Ridvan Bari Urcosta with us, and he's going to present us the topic Russian invasion of Ukraine from a military and geopolitical perspective. Ridvan is a PhD candidate at the Center for Strategic Studies, University of Warsaw, and he also teaches an independent Erasmus course, Russia and the Middle East, Geopolitics and Diplomacy. He also worked right after annexation. He worked as before the annexation, he lived in Crimea and worked in the Sevastopol state administration. But right after the annexation, he worked as a human rights officer in Odessa, Ukraine, in the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission. Mr. Urcosta graduated from the Estonian Diplomatic Academy in 2015 and completed the Indigenous Fellowship Program in 2017. So he worked with various UN agencies and as well as Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva. He gave a speech at the UN Human Rights Council about the human rights situation in annexed Russian Federation, occupied Russian Federation, the occupied Crimea. Previously, he has also provided insights to different analytical centers such as European Council on Foreign Relations, Jamestown Foundation, War Room of US War College, the Proceedings of US Naval Institute, Jerusalem Post, and others. So he's also widely published in many newspapers and media organs. So without further ado, I want to leave the floor to Ridvan. Thank you for coming today.
Sağ olunuz, memnun oldum, and thank you for invitation. But actually, it had to be much shorter. I'm a PhD student first of all, and I'm finishing my thesis. It's about Soviet Union strategy towards Middle East. It takes several aspects, which actually a bit helps to me understand the Russian foreign and maybe even grand strategy towards world, and particularly in Eurasia, because it takes ideological aspects, pure geopolitical aspects of Soviet Union conduct in the Middle East. But today I really would like to speak about current war in Ukraine, Russian aggression against the Ukrainian people, against Ukraine. But at the same time, I would like to outline that my perspective, it would be concentrated on the things that I would try, let's say, explain the Russian perspective, how they see and what kind of strategy they developed, elaborated towards Ukraine, and what they are actually pursue, and where is the limits of this strategy, and could we hope actually that Russia one day or is going to stop, and when Russia is going to stop, and maybe actually it is even harder, of course, imagine, but sometimes Russia behave, I would say, irrationally, and has a very symbolic and some kind of moral justification on its actions in Eurasia. So I would divide my speech for several, let's say, categories or several components, like a global picture, Eastern Europe. Yes, mostly it's about would be Eastern Europe after Russian geopolitical and military goals in Ukraine, Crimean faster because we are Crimean Tatars. And for us, it's very important to understand where is the linchpin and of Russian invasion and the place of Crimea in this linchpin, I would say. I would try to speak about like the change of Russian strategy from after the start of the war against Ukraine from Crimean scenario to Syrian scenario. So it's completely different approaches and they have completely different algorithms. And even I would say that Russia in certain point turned it to the tactic of scorched earth. So they're really destroying the Ukrainian infrastructure and first of all, even Ukrainian people. And finally, I would try to speak, of course, about war theaters in Ukraine. And at the end, I would try to answer, I think it's the most important question, when Russia is going to stop. And would be able to stop, I mean, West, Ukrainians, people, even maybe Russian people, stop Russia in her illegal actions and actually it's like almost evil actions in Ukraine. So the global picture. The global picture, in order to understand the global picture, what's going on, we need to actually return a bit to the Cold War times and understand the global strategy and grand strategy of the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union, it was maybe one of the first, after the October Revolution, it was one of the first state in the world history that, or in the capitalist history, that turned it totally against the West. So the Russian Empire was a part of this world, but after the October Revolution, Russia turned it completely into something new creature, new geopolitical creature, and Russia started to build alternative world. It's turned it to the east. Russia turned it to the not only to Eurasia, but to completely new sphere, completely new world, I would say. After we would call it third world or developing world, undeveloping world. So, even in my PhD, I feeling this, how Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky, Kamenev, in their works, they developed this kind of strategy. So it had to be some new, as I said, alternative world order, whereas capitalist countries are not leading in this world. But of course, it had to be under leadership of the Soviet Union, but the economic component should be completely out of the capitalist world. Already in the 60s and the 70s, to economic component was added a financial component. So the Soviet Union was struggled to create alternative financial system worldwide. Of course, it was hard for the Soviet Union to create such a system. Simply why? Because the Soviet Union was autarky, economic autarky, and the Soviet Union was not able to create, participate in the capitalist world system. But current Russia, contemporary Russia, it's completely different state, completely different element, or even again, I would return to the geopolitical creature concept. Russia is different than the Soviet Union. We should take into account this. And let me return to the 80s during the Soviet Union times. Primakov started. He was a young scholar in the Soviet institutions, and in the beginning of 80s, he and some of his colleagues wrote a couple books, and these books were concentrated that Soviet Union is becoming weak. So they understood that at the beginning of 80s. But at the same time, we need to build, it was directly almost written in these books, that we need to build completely new world financial and economic order, and of course, geopolitical one, where the capitalist monopoly, or let's say capitalist hegemony, would be mixed with other centers of the power throughout the globe. And eventually, Primakov became foreign minister of Russia, or already after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and prime minister. So, and he transferred his geopolitical visions to contemporary Russia, to the Russian Federation. And now, of course, Russia was weak, and still Russia is weak, only 2% of global GDP. But Russian political leadership, they decided that they ready to do something and ready to go to creation completely new. Of course, it's a high risk for them. They could be defeated, destroyed, partitioned for different states. If we take some kind of political and historical discourse, contemporary discourse on this regard. But at the same time, they decided to go. And it started, of course, we could say that in 2018, or when Putin's Munich speech. But actually, it started in 2014 in Crimea. And it was like a doorstop for future actions of Russia. Again, we need to see Russia not as a specifically like a continuation of the Soviet Union. No. We need to see Russia as a specific historical phenomenon that incorporated I would say the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, and contemporary, let's say, aspects of which Russia gained since 91. But again, so for instance, when we see the Russia's action, Russian foreign policy or Russian strategy, it doesn't have a pure it's very hard to find some kind of pure clarification. What is Russia? What is behind Russian? Some kind of sacral, because Russia explained it that an annexation of Crimea has a sacral meaning for them, or it has particularly very let's say pure national interest, pure geopolitical aspect of Russian conduct in Eurasia. Or it's something completely different, ideological, for instance. But at the same time, again, sorry, but as I said, it first part of my speech, my presentation, that we should return to the 1990, when Solzhenitsyn wrote his famous article regarding how he sees Russia. So in my opinion, of course, it's very subjective, and maybe you could not agree with this opinion, but we are witnessing creation of some new Russia in terms of some kind of national state. I would say some processes saying we are witnessing that like a process of enriching new phenomenon in Eurasia. So Solzhenitsyn said in this article that what the new Russia needs: Belarus, Ukraine without Western Ukraine, Crimea, so if I'm not mistaken, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and finally Northern Kazakhstan. So according to Solzhenitsyn's vision, I would surely say that it is something national. So it's some completely different, because we need to understand that during the Soviet Union and the Russians, of course, the basis was on Russian. Yes, the main ethnic basis of Soviet Union were the Russians, but it wasn't, I would say, a national state. But now Putin is trying to search the way to find some kind of modus operandi and ally the concept of national state, Eurasian state, and empire, and some elements of the Soviet Union, like like a ground strategy, like a challenger of the world, challenger of the leading Western countries, and even Russia is like a challenger towards entire West, and helping some kind of mission, I would say. Second part of this, I would say that sorry, but again, after sanctions, we are already witnessing that Russia is trying to start the process of creation new alternative concept of alternative financial system. Maybe because Russia was kicked out from many international forums, and they would try to build something new again in the alternative to whereas, for instance, sorry for saying this, but whereas Western dominated international institutions, they would try to make something alternative. And like a second part, it's about the Eastern Europe. I would say that Eastern Europe is returning to its natural state. From the, it's hard, maybe, I'm not historian, like pure historian, but maybe from the 17th century, when the Crimean Khanate, Rzeczpospolite, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth started to become quite weak, and Russian pressure from the north to south started much stronger, and eventually they incorporated, occupied and incorporated these lands, these states into the new Russian Empire. These lands, let's say from the current territories of Ukraine, Belarus, Baltic states, and finally Poland, they become a periphery, one of the global periphery. And this periphery only finished, I would say, of course, we had some kind of bright moment between wars in 20th century, but it was only bright moment, very short moment. But Eastern Europe stopped to be periphery only after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And now we're returning to, as I said, to natural state. Of course, it's, I would even call it like a drama of Eastern Europe, because I wrote this article maybe in November, and I was saying that, that the One Belt, One Road, which is passing through, let's say, China, Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus, and to Poland, and eventually goes to different direction in Europe, would be stopped eventually. It's imminent. In my opinion, it's sooner or later this One Belt, One Road, or as it's called, Europe-China Express, and it showed within the last 2-3 years quite great success. Comparing with the sea roads, it's cheaper and faster, and we should, sorry for that, but we should take into account that before annexation of Crimea, Ukraine had to be the main linchpin or some kind of bridge between this one belt, one road between China and Europe, but it switched after annexation and moved to Belarus. So, and second part of this kind of, as I said, natural part of Eastern Europe, it's a sphere of influence, division of Europe, partition of these countries. And we are witnessing, of course, we could not say that the West is like a give up Ukraine. No, West is helping, assisting to Ukrainian militaries and pushing quite strong sanctions against Russia. But it is, as I said, it is in some terms, it is again we are witnessing that Eastern Europe is suffering the concept, or in not suffering, and plus witnessing return of the old and bad concept of sphere of influence, and it is unfortunately we don't know how it is going to end, and within the last couple of years, Russia managed to control Belarus. So, but she didn't find the solution regarding Ukraine. And in this article, which I wrote in November, I said, so for Ukraine future and destiny is to be, I would not say that it is going to be new Curzon line, because we had a Curzon line which divided Eastern Europe a couple of times. But it is hard to say, but again, we can witness that in next years, if Russia would not be defeated or collapsed, that would be established some sort of the Iron Curtain or in even Curzon line system in Eastern Europe. Yes. One particular moment. So Turkey, within the last couple of years, was promoting, specifically after the war in the Nagorno-Karabakh, specifically interesting concept that that the one belt, one road should go not through the Eastern Europe, but through the Kazakhstan, Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, and eventually to Turkey and to Europe. So in case of a high level of escalation and or real collapse of economic activities through the Belarusian-Polish border or Belarusian-Baltic states border, we could witness that that middle corridor could be the main connection, supply line between China and Europe. And finally, for instance, just maybe a couple of days ago, Finland said that she prefers to have a connection and some deliveries of the products from China, particularly from the middle corridor. So I don't know, and it is hard to predict, but in my opinion, we would witness that some move. Of course, Russia within 5 years, it was started this project 5 years ago. Near the St. Petersburg, they created quite huge communicational with Chinese investments, by the way, a communicational hub that would connect China with Europe through the Russia, through the Baltic Sea. But if we take into account that the European countries are blocking any passage through the Russia, so we could expect that it would move due to this war, move to middle corridor. So Russian geopolitical and military goals in Ukraine. I would say that Russia pursued quite dialectical strategy, especially in Ukraine. So it's depending from Ukrainian resistance. It is depending from a resistance of the West and position of the West. And eventually it's depending from domestic situation in Russia and let's say connection or relations between, for instance, Russia and Turkey or Russia and other countries like China, India. So, and of course in the battlefield, as I said, regarding the resistance of Ukrainians. But it is definitely that if you are reading Russian discourse currently, even throughout all these 8 years, it is possible to make a conclusion that the Russians saying that we missed the opportunity in 2014. So the Crimea, it was, yes, it's good, it was great game, but we had a Kharkov, we had the opportunity with Kherson, Odessa, but we failed. And why we wait 8 years? You can find many such questions in Russian, let's say, in Russian narrative or in Russian discussion regarding this issue. But okay, they started the war, and the war is, we are all witnessing this war. But at the same time, in April, I wrote a big article. It was about scenarios of war, and I developed many in details how this war should be happened and what kind of territorial possessions Russia would like to see. I didn't expect that Russia would attack Kiev, actually. I said that the old history between Poland and Russia, these wars, for instance, in eternal peace, it was uncertain regarding Kiev. It was quite interesting history had a Kiev between, so regarding the left bank Ukraine, it was clear for Russia and for Poland, but regarding in case of Kiev, it was uncertain. But anyway, I don't want to go to history, but it is very strategic component. It is very visible that without control of Belarus and without the consent of Lukashenko, it would be almost impossible to Russia search in very fast manner to reach territory of Kiev. Of course, they are in the outskirts of Kiev, but I would say that Lukashenko is a complete and he is a war criminal, but it is obvious that in military terms and strategic terms, the territory of Belarus was crucial for Russians. Even if you try to measure the distance between the edge of Russian territory that is closest to Kiev, it's quite far. But from Belarus, it was really easy to get territory to the territory of Kiev or outskirts of the Kiev. But first of all, I would say that Russia would try to gain territories of so-called Novorossiya, or from, let's say, from Kharkov and Odessa. It is hard to imagine that they are going to conquer entire these territories, and but until now, I should be shorter. So the second goal, it's a cut of Ukraine from the seas. I mean the Sea of Azov and Black Sea, and it is very important. Again, I return to history. As a Crimean Tatar, I always was considering why actually Poland was, or before Lithuania was controlling these territories, current Ukraine, and I find for myself answer. Of course, it could not be correct, and maybe it is obviously maybe error, but because Crimean Tatars were controlling the northern Black Sea shores. So entire trade and entire, let's say, sphere or ecosystem of Ukrainian people in the north of, let's say, in the north, was only, it's like isolated from the Black Sea. Even right now, I'm reading a famous Ukrainian geopolitician, Lipa, quite famous, one of the best, I think. He was writing in the 30s. He started his book that the Ukrainian future in the south, we need to control this northern Black Sea shores. It is only future that gives to us independence. So the message was like that. And now Russia, as I said, its second goal, of course, it is conundrum why Russia is nothing to, maybe Russia exhausted own forces. They don't have a capability to attack and cut Odessa region from the western Ukraine and let's say Ukrainian heartland, I mean the center of Ukraine. But it is really interesting for me that Odessa is still is able to maintain communications with the central and eastern Ukraine. So it is, but anyway, it is a Russian strategy. And second, that in my opinion, that Russia is not going to return, for instance, of course, if Russia would be defeated, if Russia would be Russia would collapse and Putin's regime is going to collapse, definitely it's completely different story. But as so far, it's visible that Russia is not going to give up these territories. For instance, they established own administration for Kherson. It's a TV station working. And we need to take into account, it was about the Crimea, but look, Crimea helped to Russia to develop some kind of pattern of actions or some kind of framework of actions. Why? I was active during the annexation of Crimea. I was working with a Canadian journalist, and I had opportunity to move everywhere during the annexation, during the referendum, and I was sitting in the political discussion, even pro-Russian, some kind of events, and I noticed from the very first days, they developed TV stations, they developed radio stations, they developed a justification system, I mean like ideological, like framework. And now they're working with already working with the peoples that are under occupation in Kherson region. So, and as I said, they established local government, local pro-Russian government, who said that our future with Russia. I was listening to, of course, we all hope, and it is not going to happen. But I'm explaining, let's say, Russian perspectives in this regard. Next goal, of course, as I said, it is Russia, Crimean scenario and Syrian scenario. So when Russia really hoped that people would go with flowers and with, Ukrainian people are going to hug Russian soldiers and so on and so on. No, it didn't happen. Ukrainians really considering Russians as occupants, and and the Ukrainian army started resisting, and Russia is having heavy losses due to this resistance. That's why they changed the strategy, and they approaching closer and closer to let's say Syrian scenario, bombing, destroying infrastructure, killing people, and maybe, of course, it can be my mistake. They are pursuing some kind of, they are not resisting if people are going out to Poland, somewhere else. They would work with those who will decide stay in this occupied region. So, and if they would control, they would indoctrinate them in own ideology. So again, it's, as I said, Crimea was a precious experience for them. It was a precious experience for them. And tactic of scorched earth. It is very important to understand that we know that when Russia started the war, they said demilitarization and denazification. But Putin, when he was saying, from his speech, I took two things: decommunization and decolonization. So Russians regarding entire this infrastructure, which was built during the Soviet Union, or some as a heritage, even from during the Soviet Russian Empire, they regarding it as our own infrastructure, as our own efforts, own capital, own funds, and so on. So the Putin, in my opinion, searched a way to destroy it and make Ukrainians suffer. I think it's like some paranoia, of course, I would say, but we having what we have, I would say. The war theaters. Again, returning to the Russian goals in military terms, the grand strategy of Russia right now, currently, it is destroy the most experienced, the most effective, and the most yes, I would say that I would not describe it further, but Ukrainian army. So the Ukrainian forces that were near the near the Donbass were defending Ukraine during this conflict in Donbass. It's the most effective, and Russia is pursue the goal to undermine and destroy these Ukrainian forces or Ukrainian army there. So according to their calculations, if they would able to destroy the best part of Ukrainian army, it would be much easier to conquer the rest of Ukraine, or for instance, only territories of so-called Novorossiya, like Kharkov, Odessa line. So, but until now, it is obvious for them that we only need to concentrate on the eastern front. So, but the front in Kiev, the front near Kharkov, it's stabilization front. So they keeping Ukrainians, and even the main task of Russian Navy near Odessa, it's keep busy Ukrainian forces. It's like the clung them in this area, and it is still unclear for me the real geographical goals of Russia. So until they are not achieving even part of this goal, they are not going to sign, in my opinion, any peace agreement with Ukrainians. So, and they really bogged down this war. And at the same time, I see maybe this war is, as I said from the very beginning, it's attempt to revolutionize Russia, change Russia from the very within. Because we had, Slavyanophilia is Zapadniki. It's like a Slavyanophiles and pro-Western elements in Russian intellectual culture. And the pro-Western element was winning during the 90s, even during the beginning of 2000. But now I certainly can say that it's end of Russia-Europe concept. It is end. And when Putin said about fifth column recently, it is particularly about this. So they targeting pro-European or pro-Western elements within, or pro-democratic elements within Russia. So they're trying to change. And this war is part of, it's hard to say that it was planned or not, but anyway, it is about, it is changing Russia. It is changing Russia. And so I speak too much, yes?
Okay, thank you very much, Ridvan, for this very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. So I will open the floor for questions now. And yeah, please.
I can
ask 25 questions. Go ahead first. Go ahead. I have 25.
Okay, go ahead, Burak, and then we'll take it from Victor. Yeah.
Okay. In Putin's opinion, we know that he many times talk about this. The collapse of the Soviet Union is a loss and a terrible thing for Russia, he said. Russia, thinking that it has, in my opinion, thinking that it has nothing to lose and follows more aggressive policies and doesn't hesitate to carry out military operations everywhere. On the other hand, there is order and prosperity provided by the Western world. And this is also the weak spot because they don't want to risk it, and Russia uses it very well. It was always said that in our era, we will now only see proxy wars, but in Ukraine, it has changed. NATO says it will protect its own borders, but it also means that it will do nothing for countries like Moldova and Georgia and other post-Soviet countries. That are also outside of NATO. In your opinion, Ridvan, what will be the breaking point in this process?
I think breaking point it's only defeat of Ukrainian's army or collapse of Ukrainian army, because as I said, it is war. It's not about actually Ukraine. It's about more than Ukraine. So if Russia managed to exert on Ukraine's own will, it would Moldova would collapse. I mean, collapse with entire system of this pro-Western system in Eurasia would collapse. And it is the most dangerous scenario, in my opinion. So even right now, Moldova, it's like, yes, we're a neutral country, but of course, we would like to be member of European Union. The same about Georgia, and they both, Moldova and Georgia, they didn't join to sanctions against Russia. Why? Because they understand the consequences. And this war, as I said, it's more about even. Look, I had the discussions with Poles here because I said that when I was presenting the global picture, that during the vote in the General Assembly, UN General Assembly, more than 100 countries voted yes. It's so they support it, but just check the numbers of the countries who joined the sanctions against Russia. Argentina, Brasilia, even I'm not going to list these countries, but anyway, we were witnessing that something is changing, and but the greatest and the devastational scenario, in my opinion, as I said, it's Ukraine itself. Returning to the Lipa, this Ukrainian geopolitician, he feels that when you're reading, he considered or assess Ukraine as something, unique and unique country with a global meaning. I don't know how he felt this and how he understands this, but he very well understood the own country, in my opinion. So it is Ukraine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Victor, now it's your turn.
So I have, biggest question for me is the grand strategy of Russia. I may have missed some things you said, but what about this for a grand strategy for Russia? Okay, we are technologically weak. We have a poor economy. We have demographic problems, really serious, and so forth. But we have a great military, or we have very strong nuclear forces. So no one's going to ever invade us. We're going to build it up in the next generation. As Michael Khodorkovsky says, the world is lucky that they invaded Ukraine in 2014 and the world woke up. They weren't really. If this happened, maybe now, but now they're seeing Russia's not so strong, but maybe 10, 20 years later, the world would still be asleep and Russia would be very powerful conventionally. But what about this for grand strategy? You know, okay, China is bigger and stronger, but no one's going to dare step foot in Russia because we have nuclear weapons, so we're safe.
Yes, it's possible. Of course, it's part of the. But I concentrated on Ukraine and Eurasia. But definitely it is. Definitely it is. And but at the same time, one of my directors in my he's geopolitician, but George Friedman. He believes, for instance, that China in his articles he is writing that China and the United States are able to find agreement and stabilize the world, and maybe even China go against Russia, and some kind of Russia would be outcast of the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Fareed Zakaria is talking about that a lot too. That's just, we should. But the other big connected with this grand strategy or the Brzezinski doctrine. There's a Brzezinski doctrine that is repeated sometimes by everybody mindlessly. He said something very stupid, I think. He said, Russia without Ukraine is not an empire. Now, first, it's stupid on 2 points. One is stupid because if you look at the map, Russia, well, first of all, Russia is an empire without Ukraine. Secondly, Russia has three seas, basically. Russia is the biggest country, the richest country, you could say, resource-wise. So how is this not an effing empire? Secondly, it's stupid because it accepts the West as well. Russia has to have Ukraine, otherwise it's not, of course, we know what's in their heads. They have a mental problem, about this, but, it's stupid to repeat this, this cliche meme. Russia is an empire, and thank God it'll be lucky if it can remain an empire with what it has. I don't know.
Pan Victor, actually, I more agree with Brzezinski. Why? When I was started my course, Russia and the Middle East, actually I started from Ukraine. From Ukraine. For me, Ukraine is part of the greater Middle East. It is obvious that because we have different concept of what is Middle East, but one of the first concept of the Middle East is for Ottoman Empire, yes, and Crimea, Odessa, Donbass. They were a part of Ottoman Empire, and for me it was obvious that that Ukraine part of this greater Middle East. That's why I started from Ukraine. And Ukrainians and the Turks in general, Turkic people, they were blocking. Let's say from the northern Caucasus to Kiev area, they were blocking Russian access to the Black Sea. So without access to the Sea of Azov, to the Black Sea, it would be hard to imagine that Russia would be able to, project of power in the Middle East. But again, it is my theory that it is not about. Of course, we could argue that Western Ukraine is important during the history, but in my opinion, the actually war is happening Dar, East, Kipchak. It is actually a particular area from Kharkov, which belonged, it is some Polovetskaya Zemlya. I don't know how to say in English, Polovets lands, exactly from this area. So the war is happening for this land, big land.
No, I mean, Russia could be a greater empire if it had Ukraine. It could be a greater empire if it had the Balkans. But as it is, it has access to the Black Sea. Okay, not the greatest. It has access to the Middle East, to the Caucasus. It's still an empire with what it has. Yes or no?
No,
it's a superpower.
I don't agree. I think even
it cannot be so. Even if it had no access, China only has access to one ocean. It's not a superpower.
Yes, I agree.
I mean,
but
so Russia
security feeling.
With what Russia is a complete empire and world power player. Obviously, could be better off. you know. Anyway, okay, leave that aside.
No, I agree with you. With I mean, with status
so it's not,
currently, yes.
Of course, you won't
For-
change their what's in their minds, but it's not helpful when people in the West repeat the same thing, because it somehow normalizes it. But the other question I have 3 more questions, smaller ones. Is it, maybe somebody else wants to go first?
Yes. Are there any more questions? You can go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, going back to 2014. So why did they fail? I mean, the Ukrainian army was not so great. I guess their army maybe wasn't so great. I mean, they 2014 would have been the ideal thing for them to finish it. And the other thing is, if I was, let's see, this is, you know, my personally, I think that his #1 goal is Ukraine, and then everything else is sort of gratis. He really wants to get Ukraine, because without Ukraine, Russia is not Russia. So I get annoyed when people are saying, oh, it's not about Ukraine, it's about NATO, and it's about, if he was smart in 2014, see, this is where it goes against my argument. He would have signaled to the West, says, don't worry, I'm not going to go any further. I mean, there's one side to say, okay, to scare them, say, I'm going to go, you know, and scare them, because they are cowards anyway. But then he should have signaled in 2014, said, don't worry, all I want is Crimea, or all I want is Ukraine, and I won't touch you. And then he could have had it probably, or maybe not. I don't know really. You know, Ukrainians say, "Oh, the Ukrainian nation stood up, and the Dobrobat, the volunteers came and fought and stopped the world's 2nd largest power." I just don't understand the military situation in 2014. Why it didn't happen.
I think like after 2000, this war in Georgia against Georgia. Russians, they really understand that their army is weak, first of all, and they eventually was appointed Serdukov for reformation of army. And in my opinion, yes, it was great picture in Crimea with this green man, but they are not able to conquer entire Ukraine, even with uncomparable resistance what Ukrainians are doing right now, and so it would be really hard to conquer them. And plus, it is about you know, feeling of Russia-Europe concept. So they were not ready to, you know, cut this, destroy entire this intellectual edifice. Of course, it's just a guessing, yes, but in my opinion, it was about this. But they really regret that they didn't attack rest of the Ukraine.
If they were too weak, that brings us something very important. This is part of my question still. I just realized, because the general wisdom, perceived wisdom, was that it would have been a mistake if Ukraine and Crimea had shot back. That would have been terrible, because Russia would have invaded Ukraine. It would have been all-out war, and there was no government, no army. In fact, that means those few people that say that Ukraine could have and should have shot back in Crimea right away, they were actually right. They should have fought. There would have been a war of some sort, but probably, but then I don't know again. The state the Ukrainian army was then, it's really a question, you know. Anyway.
I agree. I mean, Ukrainian army is a lot more different, I think, 8 years after. I'm not a military expert, but the way I see it, and I think the experience with the Donbass war has really worked for the army, just like, you know, Turkish army also always is good practiced army, right? Because of its, you know, war with PKK.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Sezai, go ahead.
Okay. I just read Stephen Kotkin's New Yorker article, and it's about they talk about the internal dynamics of Russia. And his answer is, you know, we had this debate about Iraq. Was Iraq the way it was because of Saddam, or was Saddam the way he was because of Iraq? I asked the question to Ridvan about the Putin. Was Russia the way it was because of Putin, or was Putin the way he was because of Russia?
Yes.
What was behind?
I think.
What was behind the decision to invade Ukraine? Yes.
No. The thinking of, I mean, the thinking about the Putin. I mean, the Putin, I mean, because it's the geopolitics, I mean, the Putin is behaved because of the Russia is, because even, Navalny, you talk about the Solzhenitsyn, even they want, the bigger, better, I mean, revisionist Russia. They want to expand it. They don't want to be democratic or respect human rights. My question is internal dynamics of Russia. How it affects the behavior of Putin or Putin. I mean,
yeah, I think I understand. So I understand. I think both because of the Putin's background. But you know what I noticed, because I'm from Sevastopol, and I grew up around this. This culture, Russian culture, this Russian officers or former Soviet officers. Of course, I was like a Crimean Tatar boy who was listening, observing everything. But I already at that time, when I was reading books, ancient Greek books, I mean about the history of ancient Greece, I made for myself conclusion that these people, or even the country, it's some kind of Sparta. And they were really regretting. I remember group of former Russian Soviet officers. They were drinking, they were disappearing, they were arguing that why we are living in such conditions. But after annexation of Crimea, it's everything changed. So the Putin gives to these people like as a meaning, the meaning of their nature in terms of that they need to conquer the military culture. So in some terms, I would agree that what we are witnessing, it is about Russian culture itself. And from others' part, it is of course that Putin is KGB guy, and this elite which is ruling over the biggest country in the world, it is totally military in its nature and spy or whatever. So they have a conspirological nature, I would say. They see the world that everything against them. And when Pan Victor said about China, but until United States controlling Taiwan, Formosa Island, China would feel itself unsecure. But Russians, even they would conquer Ukraine, they are not going to stop feeling themselves unsecure. This is the biggest drama with this state. And until they have this nuclear state, nuclear power, nuclear warheads, it would be even drama for the entire world, in my opinion. So I would say that both.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I will now abuse if there are not more questions, abuse my position and ask my own questions. So about the Russian people, I mean, they are a conundrum. People are writing emails and letters to them, showing pictures of war. Still, there isn't reaction in most of them. I mean, I think 20% of the Russian people are liberals and opposing Putin. But you just mentioned Russian culture, right? I mean, when we say, when we talk about political culture, it's generally said that Turkey has 60% conservative vote, right? Like 60% of the people in Turkey are conservative. So can we say same thing, like, I don't know, 75, 80% of the people are internalized this imperialist identity? I mean, they see nothing wrong with it. They don't feel shame or guilt about it. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree, because even, again, returning to Crimea, not many, but from Crimea, it's big part of, some part of the Crimean population is already participating in occupation of Ukraine. And maybe more, some already dead people arrived. I mean, they were killed during the war in Ukraine, arrived to Sevastopol, in other cities in Crimea. So it is about culture, but at the same time, as I said at the very beginning, that we are witnessing the end of Russia-Europe concept, And it
Right.
means that I would not say that immediately we would witness huge purges. I mean, there's a huge wave of purges against pro-democratic, pro-Western elements in Russia, but it is imminent, in my opinion, that it's going to happen, because they need to destroy it. Putin said it's himself that we have a fifth column, and they are going to attack this fifth column. And I really worrying about the Crimean Tatars in Crimea, because it's changing their situation. Everyone knows that they have a completely different political views, different culture, and I hope that this purges and or this persecution is not going to destroy their will and resistance and cohesion, and even, as I said, will that to stay in Crimea. So, in my opinion, you know, it is something about Crimean Tatars. That if the Crimean Tatars would decide, because I have many friends, yes, I'm discussing this, and some even saying that we need to go to Turkey, go to Turkey because of they're afraid that they could be prosecuted, and particularly it's about mobilization. The mothers of the Crimean Tatar, they afraid that their sons would kill the Ukrainians. Yes, many of them consider themselves a part of Ukraine, and they're afraid that they would go and kill each other. I mean, Ukrainians. It's nightmare for them. And I heard many times that Turkey or some other places. But in my opinion, if we are going to leave Crimea, abandon Crimean Tatars, it was defeat to us. It would be concrete defeat for Crimean Tatars. So, and we should stay in Crimea, despite the situation. And only it is like maybe our grand strategy of Crimean Tatars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But how about the other Muslim peoples of the Russian Empire? Not Russian Empire, Russian state. I mean, we don't hear much about them, right? But there is this discourse that, you know, half of the soldiers killed are coming from Muslim background or Turkic background. So, I mean, how they can comply this? I mean, we remember there has been some resistance in Tatarstan, right, in 2000s, and of course in Chechnya, but in other places as well, maybe Bashkiria and other. I mean, how do they participate in, I mean, how can they participate in this Putin's war or ideology?
I think it's like as a bandit, Putin and his clique, they're using, the Soviet Union was doing the same. Remember when in the 1979 was famous operation against the president of Afghanistan, and they had a battalion of Muslim battalion. So, in my opinion, it was some kind of strategy from, you know, like as bandits are doing. It is about make people accomplice, so they would participate in illegal actions. So, and when the young men from Northern Caucasus, from Tatarstan, from other non-ethnically Russian regions participating in this war, they making their hands, you know, bloody, and they participating in this. In my opinion, it's particularly deliberately and well-evaluated strategy of, not strategy, too many times I'm using this word, but it was specifically decided that to send a good proportion of non-Russians to this war. So they would be part of this disaster. But for Russia, they would immediately put, you know, the difficult relations between, for instance, Ukrainians or other pro-democratic or pro-European peoples, and the majority of the Tatarstan or Northern Caucasus, they are complice, as I said. They're participating in this illegal actions.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Yeah. So something I wanted to add is why didn't Russia attack in 2014, but attack now. I think we didn't talk about West's role in that, but the fact that West accepted that they will not fight with Russia, they will not interfere, I think has been an important motivation for Putin to decide now, right? Attack now. Do you agree? What do you think West's role was in this?
Oh, I think the Western role was crucial, but at the same time, actually, I don't know really, because when it's concerns the West, it is not my,
not your
domain. Yes, and particularly because I'm in the West right now. Yes, it's better. Yes.
I'm here. Yeah. So about just about that, I also wonder, this signaling by the West. I asked this in the last session that we had about, the famous story of when they were in Georgia ready to take Tbilisi, and then supposedly Bush ordered a transport plane landed in the Tbilisi airport, and that stopped the Russians supposedly, and also maybe a ship nearby. I don't know if that's how much that, but this kind of thing, a corollary that would be the no-fly zone business. Of course, it's very risky, but I was thinking that before the war started, I mean, this would have played in the Russian narrative that the West is out to get them. But so what? We know that there's a war anyway. If the U.S. had just said, if Zelensky had said, we are closing our skies, nobody is to fly without our permission, okay, and then asked Indonesia, or better, U.S. and NATO, say, please help us enforce the closure of our skies, then Russia would have been the aggressor going into skies that are not, sovereign territory is not theirs, and would they dare do that? Would they dare go against the West or NATO? If their skies were closed, they knew their planes could be shot down. And even if their planes were shot down, it doesn't mean that necessarily a nuclear war. I mean, there's this timidity in the West. They could have taken the initiative and closed the skies. But so I just wonder about that. But I have two more questions.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't have a time, but I can add maybe actually to try to answer to your question. It is about, I think the Western society is completely changed. I mean, the American narrative, it's like a dominating in the Western society. But when I say American narrative, is about Woodrow Wilson concept. That Woodrow Wilson was against the concept of the sphere of influence. They really were against this. But at the same time, in 1940, during the Tehran conference or Yalta conference, because in Poland it's quite famous phrase, it's Nowa Yalta, New Yalta. So we approaching to New Yalta. Why? Because due to this concept of sphere of influence, Poland became a victim of partition. Yes, and could we say that we are witnessing Nova Yalta or something like that, but in Eastern Europe? I would say that even it is happening, but it could not happen as the Russian used to make the deals with the West. And the West is not ready to deal as they used to. In the 40s, I mean, during the Second World War, we had a Churchill, and still United Kingdom was quite strong power, global power. And Churchill was a guy who used to deal in colonial way. I mean, sphere of influence, makes lines, this is yours, and so, something like that. Now it's impossible. The Western society or the public in any Western country would destroy any government who would sign such deal with Russia or whatever could be, not only Russia. So it is early to say that we are witnessing some deal. But I would say even if it is deal, but it would not look like a, let's say, as a specific document. Iron Curtain happened as an element of huge preconditioned by Tehran conference, by Yalta conference, and so on and so on. Now it's not going to be like that. So none side would, for instance, the West would never recognize those occupied territories if Russia would manage to keep these territories. Never, with Crimea, with Ukrainian territories, and so on. But status quo, new status quo could be established, like a non-official, non-recognized Iron Curtain. So that's it.
I have an action item for everybody. But before that, I just wanted to comment on this. We hear, I have not followed it much. We don't hear much, and I should go into the Institute of Study of War more and critical. What's the name of the site? We don't really hear much about the Ukrainian army on the Donbass line. Now we hear about Mariupol, and that's Azov, and I don't know what else they have in there. But it's interesting that they haven't been able to move much, and that we don't hear much about that army being so strong. But your point about that's the most strongest part,
I can explain, because Ukrainians within the last 8 years, they developed quite good fortification line, quite good. So the Russians experts, military experts, they recognize this. Even recently, this one of the propagandists from Russia, he said, you know why we attacked in Kharkov, why we attacked through Crimea? Because we avoiding this fortification lines. So it is complicated, so complicated system of defense. They understood that it would be like a suicidal to attack in front, from the Donbass. And that's why there is some kind of circumventing this fortification system.
That's why there are big battles now for Izum right now.
Yes.
Which is but it's interesting because in the news they're always showing, if you're watching on CNN and BBC, they're always showing the line, the Ukrainian line in the east. They're always showing some ragtag guys sitting in bunkers, and they look really pathetic. Like there's no, and the Ukraine was not really advertising much what it has there. It's clearly they had quite a bit there, several lines of defense.
But they have big problems because it's quite far. So let's say its weakness and strengths of Ukraine because of the big territory, big area of let's say enormous war theater. But it's both. For Ukrainians, they have some kind of advantage and disadvantage. And Russians, they maybe if it would be much smaller country, they would demonstrate it as in Crimea, or somehow they managed to do in Syria. But with such enormous territory, which only from the south to north, it's about 600 kilometers. And connection between let's say Donbass area, fortification line in Donbass and Kiev, again, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. So it is very difficult. And again, until Russia is controlling the airspace in Ukraine, it's very hard to move. I mean, for instance, heavy machines, they will immediately destroy. And Russia or Ukrainians, they are using, let's say, partisan or guerrilla strategy, mixture of guerrilla strategy plus as a regular army. That's why it's very complicated things for Ukrainians. Yes.
The one thing that's really important, I just picked this up. I mentioned it to Tutku the other day. I don't know why there's no reaction to this yet. I looked in Turkish Twitter field. This you've seen this the Black Sea, the Russian Pacific Fleet has now set off from Vladivostok, going through the straits in Japan with large ships, I think some, including landing craft, with lots of equipment. And they're going to, according to the experts on TV, they're going to the Black Sea. And I did see one comment about what they've done is they've reassigned, they're not supposed to enter the Black Sea according to the Montreal Convention, right? Turkey's not supposed to allow them in. But I read one, I don't know if he's an expert, saying that they have actually, there's a loophole and they've actually reassigned those ships to the Black Sea Fleet. And having reassigned them, that means they're returning to base. And this guy claims that this is I didn't read the fine print in the Montreal Convention, but it seems like Turkey will be in 10 days, maybe no less, will have a problem of deciding if they let them through the Suez Canal. They're deciding whether to let these many ships that could be very important let in through the straits or not. I mean, Turkey is going to be really put on the spot.
Yes, Turkey could be put on the spot, but I don't think that they would really try to. Otherwise, they really destroy Turkish neutrality. It would be imminently destroy Turkish.
Either way, they destroy Turkish neutrality.
But when we had discussions, even 2 months ago, I was noticing to my colleagues that look, Russia is concentrating the forces in the naval forces in the eastern Mediterranean and in the Black Sea. So again, you see, I returning to this old point that that southern direction, it's crucial for Russians. They blocked entirely any help from the southern direction to Ukraine, any. So the NATO ships are not able to participate or counterbalance presence of Russian Navy in the Black Sea. And plus, if it would try to go through the straits, Russians have a concentration of forces in the Eastern Mediterranean. So their task is like counterbalance any attempts of the NATO to help from the southern direction to Ukraine.
They can't stop it through the straits, but but Turkey could. But they just stop block the Black Sea and Azov was off by having these big firing zones, active fire zones. But I mean, it's interesting to see what happens with this because Turkey will have to decide. That could be very important to bring in those reinforcements. In the south,
until now, it looks they have enough forces, naval forces in the Black Sea. Until now,
they don't have enough to take Odessa. I don't think Odessa seems very strong. I don't know, but I don't know why Moldavia now said they want the Russians out of Transnistria. I don't know why they're not pushing that more. They should make more noise about that.
But it would be great escalation for Moldavia.
Because there's very few forces in Transnistria. They could, yeah.
Yes, but 300 kilometers in Mykolaiv, already Russian forces. And
Mykolaiv is standing strong too. It looks.
Yes,
they want to go through Voznesensk to around, but that's really uncertain. Obviously, his plan B is successful now. Perhaps if they take Mariupol and he'll get the corridor, and he's going to try to keep that with any negotiations. That'll be a disaster for Ukraine and for Crimea and for Tatars. I just want to say one more thing. There's a statement that we had on concerned Canadian scholars on the Russian war, 4 points that people have been signing it, and we only allow Canadian citizens or permanent residents to be part of the signature list because it's going to go to the government. And it has to be PhD level or higher. That is independent scholars and people that are, because the statement starts out saying people who have spent their professional life studying this region say these 4 points, But thanks for people that have signed it. And I know Tutku has another thing on the way.
Yes, we have a letter for the Turkish scholars, which we will start to distribute, I think, from this tonight on, about, opposing the war in Ukraine and again, emphasizing the role of Crimea. I mean, I think this talk also showed us, I mean, in the worst case scenario, if Crimea or northern Black Sea remains with Russia, I think it will keep trying to attack Ukraine from there, right? Like constantly threatening Ukraine. So it's essential for Ukraine to have the Black Sea coast.
Yeah. No peace treaty will work. I mean, he'll just spend a couple more years and attack again. So,
yeah. Okay, so if there are no questions, comments, I think it's all for today. We had 1.5 hours. So thank you very much, Ridvan. It was really a great presentation, and thank you for our participants for your comments and questions. So see you in our coming events. We don't know yet, but we will announce.